Well, look who made it to episode 100. Woo! Y'all, we are celebrating the podcast reaching 100 episodes. I am so excited. Can you believe we've made it to this milestone? That's right. This podcast is officially reached the Centennial Club. We are officially in the 3 digits now. And fun fact, I think we're officially older than some TikTok trends out there. Just saying. 100, that is a huge milestone. So cue the confetti, grab your favorite drink, and buckle up because today we are not just celebrating. I am sharing from my heart the lessons learned from 100 episodes. Now, if this episode were a cake, it would have sparklers on it. If it were a party, Beyonce would be headlining. We'd all be grooving to some B, but it's just a podcast. So you get me, your girl, but I'm 100 times wiser, 100 times funnier, and that much more sassier and wiser because of this podcast. Buckle up, get your earbuds in, because today we're not just celebrating, we're deep diving into the lessons that got us here. Let's go. Hey everyone, I'm Leslie Martinez, and you're listening to your Joyful Order podcast. Each week, I will bring you joyful stories that will motivate and inspire you, and at the same time, bring order to your everyday life. Let's just say the show will be a mixture of preaching and teaching with a kick of motivation from your girl here. Welcome to your Joyful Order podcast. Welcome, friends. We've made it to 100 episodes. This is absolutely insane. I cannot believe that I have recorded, edited, produced, like all of this 100 times over. I am so excited, and I just can't believe that we've gotten here. I have to tell you, recording this episode, this was a rough episode for me to record, y'all. It really was. If you follow weekly, you might have noticed that last week there wasn't an episode because I was waiting to record the 100th episode. The week that I was expected to record this episode, I got hit with the flu, y'all. And I mean, the flu took me out. I was in bed for 3 solid days. Fever, chills, body aches, coughing, congestion. I mean, you name it, it got me. I couldn't talk. I couldn't talk clearly without hacking it up or sounding, nasally. And I didn't want to record my 100th episode being sick or just kind of pushing through. So I kind of opted, you know what? I'm just not going to post this episode this week. Now, I have tons of episodes that I have recorded with other guests that I'm just waiting to put up. But the 100th episode, I wanted it to be something special. I sat multiple times, kind of scripting it out, writing out my outline, and it just wasn't clicking. I was trying to think of all the lessons learned from this episode, and each time that I went to sit down to try to record this, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel like me. I was relying too much on ChatGPT to give me words to say, and I'm like, this isn't what I want the 100th episode to be. I want it to be heartfelt. I want it to be straight from my heart, and I want to share the lessons that I learned from 100 episodes. Y'all, this podcast has been not just like a dream, a goal that has been completed. It's something that God put on my heart, but it also has been stressful. It has caused much overwhelm. I've felt defeated by it. I have argued with my husband over it. It has caused tears, and it all has been worth it. I will tell you that. It all has been absolutely worth it. Now, when I first hit record for my first episode, I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't know how much this podcast would change me, how much it would stretch me, and the lessons that I would learn from it that I will carry on for a lifetime. So I just want to talk about a few of those lessons that I have learned from recording 100 episodes of this podcast. The first lessons is resilience. Y'all, like, oh, I can talk forever about just the resilience lessons that I have learned alone. Now, here's the thing about resilience. It's not glamorous. It's absolutely not glamorous whatsoever. It's showing up when the audience numbers are low, when life throws curveballs at you, when self-doubt whispers in your ears. Why are you even doing this? But what I've learned is that the resilience builds character. Every stumble, every obstacle has just made me that much stronger. And here we are, 100 episodes in, proof that showing up consistently, even imperfectly most of the times, that it matters. And I just want that to be a reminder to you to keep going, even when it's ugly, even when it's not perfect, even when you have curveballs coming your way, even when you have self-doubt just coming upon you, when you maybe don't have the confidence to show up, because just showing up always wins. And if I would have let the self-doubt, the lack of confidence, the curveballs, the low download numbers, if I let all of that dictate the success of this podcast, I wouldn't have gotten here to 100 episodes. So resilience has been my biggest lesson of just show up. Now, the second lesson that I have learned is the power of doing for the one. I've shared this multiple times, and y'all are probably tired of hearing it, but this is a huge lesson for me. And I just want to go a little bit into this because this is the lesson that just really rocked my core. Early on, I realized that it's not about how many people listen. It's about the impact that I make on even just the one person who does listen. Just one. Every time that I have heard from a listener who have said, this episode really impacted me. It was exactly what I needed. It was the motivation that I needed. I love listening to that guest talk about this or that. Their story really impacted me. It just reminded me of the ripple effect that starts with just one drop. It starts with one person. And if that one person can be impacted by the message and the wisdom that you gain from this episode, then it's all worth it. And it's not so much the ripple of effect of that one person goes and tells another person about the podcast, another. That's not the ripple effect I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ripple effect of you learning and gaining knowledge here and taking that wisdom and that knowledge and applying it, actually going and creating the healthy habits, creating the goals, learning how to have a gratitude morning practice, and you actually start doing it. And there's a ripple effect in your life because of the great benefits that come from the things that you learned on this podcast. That is a lesson in itself, that this is worth it just for the one. When God put it on my heart to do this podcast, I had so many reasons why not to. But God put it in my heart to do it as a ministry. And if you realize I don't monetize off of this, you don't hear commercials other than maybe things that I'm promoting, that I'm offering, coaching or journals. But I haven't used this platform to monetize yet because right now I feel that God just wants me to use it as a ministry. And when God shifted my perspective of, Leslie, this podcast isn't about making you money, about putting the light on you and giving you a big, huge platform. This is about ministry for just the one. And when I wrapped myself around this idea that this is a ministry, that I get to do this to help other people, that I get to share the message that God put in my heart, it really shifted how I show up for you every single week. I get to do this. I get to be the person in your ear cheering you on. I get to be the person putting it, out there that, hey, you got to just keep going. When life knocks you down, get up and keep going. I get to be that cheerleader in your ear. I get to be the person that maybe gives you a little kick in the behind when you need just truth, when you need to hear it straight up. I get to be that person. And I don't take that role lightly. I don't take me being in your ear right now lightly. I want to bring you information, encouragement, wisdom, things straight from the Bible that will impact you to make your life just that much more joyful. I want to bring joy and order to your everyday life. And that is the heart of what God put me to do this podcast for. And my husband and I, when we sat down to really talk about what this podcast is going to look like, we both realized that we have to treat this as a ministry, because the minute that we treat it as an opportunity to monetize it, to try to make money off of it, to grow our platform, to do all this stuff, it becomes not what God put in our heart, the reason to start this. And whether or not this podcast grows to be monetized, to create a larger platform to reach more people, I'm going to leave that in God's hands and in His timing. But for now, I'm not focusing on the numbers, although the numbers have grown as far as the download. And I just love hearing that this podcast is reaching more people. We've expanded to get on YouTube now, and more of you are watching on YouTube. Thank you so much. Shout out to my YouTube watchers. I love you guys. I mean, I love all of the listeners, but the power of just showing up for the one is what has sustained us and what has allowed us to get to 100. It's not about the numbers. It's never been about the numbers. And I truly believe in my heart that because we have treated this as a ministry and we focus on just reaching the one, that God keeps bringing the people that I am supposed to impact through this podcast. So that is probably one of the biggest lessons that I have learned, and the biggest mind shift of just focusing on the people that God has brought my way, even if it's just the one. Now, the next lesson that I've learned, this is lesson number 3 of getting to 100 episodes. And that is that God gave me a voice and it shall be heard. Now, for a long time, I hesitated to speak up about stuff. I doubted my worth. I doubted my abilities. I doubted my voice. When God put this podcast on my heart, I avoided it for like a year because I'm like, no one wants to hear me, God. I don't want to be that voice, that annoying voice in someone's ear that's just going to repeat the same thing over and over again. I put my foot in my mouth way too many times. I'm going to say something that's going to offend or piss someone off. But here is what I have learned, that when God gives you a voice, it's not just for you, that your voice is meant to be shared, to encourage, to uplift, to challenge others, to share the wisdom that you have learned with others, to share your message, to share your testimony, to share your lessons. And that is what God has called us to be. God has called us to be disciples. He's called us to be fisher of many men, and He has given us a voice to do that. So if you are listening right now, let this just be your permission slip to speak up, to write, to create, whatever it is that God has put on your heart. Your voice has power because it is uniquely yours. Your testimony, your message has so much worth because it's yours. It is the challenge, the testimony that God got you through, and it matters. And your voice needs to be heard by the world. Now, does that mean you have to go and launch podcasts? No. Does that mean you need to be this big time creator on social media and start creating all this content. No, that just means that you can share your message or your testimony with someone in your community, maybe someone at work. Maybe there's a struggling mom at work who just needs a word of encouragement. Maybe there is someone in your son's baseball team, another mom that might be struggling, maybe another mom that has gone through a divorce and you've gone through it and you want to share and give encouragement on how things work out on the other side when you just trust and believe. Maybe you're a mom that has lost someone. Maybe you've lost a loved one, you've lost a parent, a sibling, a spouse, a child. And there is someone in your community, maybe at your work, maybe someone at church that has lost someone close. Maybe you can share your message of how you've gotten through grief, how God has sustained you and allowed you to still see the good in the world. Maybe you lacked a relationship with God for a really long time and you came back to know God, and that message needs to be shared with someone. You don't need a podcast to share your message. You just need to be in community with people. And I want to encourage you to get in community because there are people that need to hear your message. And there are messages that you need to hear from others too. And it's so important that you share what God has done in your life with other people. That is how God created us. When you look at stories in the Bible, you think about how God sat at so many tables, or I'm sorry, how Jesus sat at so many tables. Jesus would sit at tables with sinners just to hear their message and to speak to them, to give them wisdom. He sat at tables that like people believed he shouldn't be sitting at. That was part of his persecution, is because he was going and sitting with these sinners, and the Pharisees were like, what are you doing? Why are you sitting with these sinners? These are the tax collectors, the prostitutes, all the shady people. Why are you even giving them any of your time? But Jesus sat there with them so that he can teach them, he can love them, and he can remind them that, hey, you're still good people. God still loves you. Even though you may be a sinner, God still loves you. And unfortunately, Jesus was persecuted because of that, because he kind of veered to the left a little bit of what was the norm. And I want to encourage you, veer to the left. Go the opposite way of what people might be telling you. Don't try to fit in a mold. Fit into where God has placed you. Go in the direction of where God is leading you. If God has told you to go and speak to some people that you normally would not want to align yourself with, be obedient and go and do that. But it's all about using your voice and knowing that your message is worth being heard. And that has been another lesson in just showing up and using this as a ministry, is knowing that my voice has a place here on the podcast. And thank you for hitting play each week and allowing my voice to speak to you. And I want you to know that I don't take that lightly. Before I hit record every podcast, I pray. If I am showing up by myself, I pray. If I'm showing up with a guest, I pray with that guest. And one of the big things that I pray is, Lord, use me, speak in and through me for the words that you want the people to hear. So it's not just my voice. I truly believe that it is God speaking through me to share a lot of this with you. And when you allow God to use you to be his voice, the impact that you will have will be significant on people around you. So trust that you have a message, trust that you have a voice, and trust God to be the voice through you. Just be obedient and trust that God is going to speak in and through you what needs to be said. All right. My next lesson learned from 100 episodes in is to show up authentically. If there is one thing that I have learned in 100 episodes, I mean, there's many, but it's this right here, that people aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for connection. And straying away from having things perfect is a big challenge for me. I am a former perfectionist, still struggling with showing up when things are not perfect. And this podcast was one of them. I was trying to make it perfect before I showed up. And then I finally realized things will never be perfect, that I am going to fail epically a lot. I'm going to put my foot in my mouth a lot, but I'm going to learn from it. But I realized that being authentic, being who I am, is what has allowed me to connect most with you, the listener. I have stumbled over words many times. I have asked awkward questions. When I first started interviewing my guests, like, I think some of the questions I asked were just horrendous. And like, I've laughed at my own jokes, stupid jokes that I say, or my sarcastic sassiness that I just laugh at myself. Don't judge me. I know. I'm certain that if you are listening, like, I am certain you have laughed at me rather than with me in some of the like stupid stuff that I just say. But I've learned to show up authentically. And that has been one of my greatest strengths, is that I show up as Leslie. That's who I'm going to show up as. I'm not going to show up as someone fake or polished or someone that I'm not. I've learned to just show up authentically. And there have been a couple of episodes where I have showed up just as myself with no script, just speaking from my heart. There was an episode that I did a while back, and I was talking about when sometimes life has to pause. Y'all, I recorded that. I was sitting at the park. I went to the park one day by myself because I was just in a really funky place. I was struggling with some things emotionally, spiritually, in my relationships. I was in a dark place. And this is when I was even questioning, why am I even doing the podcast? No one's listening. I'm going through these challenges, and it's hard for me to show up when I'm in a funk. And how am I supposed to encourage others when I'm just questioning life in general? And I went to the park. I took my morning practice with me of my gratitude journal, my devotion, my Bible, all of that. I sat at a park bench and I just did my morning routine. And I sat looking out at the water, at the ducks, at the mountain view. And I was just really having a hard time. And I felt God just really speak to me about, like, when life throws pauses at your way. And that's how I felt. I felt that there was just a huge pause on my life at that moment. And I didn't know why. I didn't know what I needed to learn. I didn't know what it was that I needed to get past in order for me to move forward. I felt that there was a reason God pressed pause on my life. And God just really spoke to me. And I'm like, I need to record what I am thinking and all of that right now. I went into my car, I got my phone, and I just recorded a voice memo. And at the time, I didn't know how I was going to use it. I didn't know if I would use it as a podcast episode, if I would just use it as a reflection for myself. But I winded up feeling God give me the urge to publish it as a podcast episode. I didn't want to, y'all, because I was vulnerable. I cried ugly during that episode. And I showed up authentically me. And that episode actually turned out to be a very highly listened to episode because I showed up authentically. I had no script. I was speaking straight from the heart, crying, ugly, questioning life, questioning my existence. And I shared some pretty deep, dark things. And there were some deep, dark thoughts that I was feeling during that time. But I showed up authentically. And I just want to invite you to do the same in your life, to do the same for others that you are called to impact. Authenticity invites others to be authentic themselves. It's the key to building trust. It is the key to building good relationships. It's the key to having good communication with people is when you are authentic. So here is my encouragement to you. Be real. Be you, because that is where the magic lies. Now, those are my lessons learned of learning to be resilient, the power of doing for the one. God gave you a voice and it shall be heard. And my last lesson is just showing up authentically. Now, I want to transition into just thanking you, the listener. I shared some lessons that I learned from 100 episodes in, but of course, none of this would mean anything if it wasn't without you, the listener. You have shown up in so many ways in just hitting play on this episode and tuning in each week and sharing the journey with me, coming along. And those of you that have been here since episode 1, oh, God bless your heart. You have heard the mess. You've heard the kind of scripted part of me trying to mumble my words and thoughts together. You've listened to those early interviews that I had no idea what I was doing, and you probably cringed at many of my episodes, and you still may cringe because I'm being authentic and real, and I might make you cringe a little bit here and there. But your messages, your encouragement, the stories that you share with me of how the podcast has impacted you is so much encouragement. It has been the fuel that keeps us going. And I want to give you all a shout out. Okay, I actually want to share a couple of reviews that you guys have written for me. Now, some of these reviews are recent, some of these are older reviews, but I realize I've never shouted my people that have given me reviews out, and I want to do that today. But I want to share some reviews on iTunes that some of the listeners have left. This is Sin RB. She wrote, "You go, girl." And her review was, "I appreciate your podcast. It's comforting to have a community rooted in God's guiding hand and his plan for us. So many learnings in each podcast. My why, writing down goals to look, and the accountability and developing focus all spoke to my soul. Thank you." Sin RB, thank you, girl. Your words are so encouraging to me. Here's another one. This is from Daylight Fading 22. Encouraging. She gives 5 stars. This is not just raw motivation without any substance. Leslie shares inspiring stories and actionable steps for living joyfully. She's like a coach and cheerleader in your pocket. I love it, y'all. Thank you so much. Here's a review from Mama Mash with 5 stars that says, "Great way to start the day. Leslie brings joy and comfort when you listen to her. It feels as though you are sitting around a table drinking coffee and having girl talk. I love the episode about self-capacity and how she states that it's not time management, but self-management that we need to work on." Y'all, these reviews mean the world to me. So just thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to just highlight you, the listeners. I want to also just give you a round of applause, a high five, a pat on the back, a thumbs up, because you are investing in yourself. These podcast episodes aren't just for me to give you words of wisdom that you don't carry out. I want this podcast to be words of wisdom that you are going to apply to your life. And I know that you that are listening right now, you guys are the goal getters. You are the people that are driven. You are self-motivated. You are just that driven person that loves to go out and learn, grow, and just slay at all things that you do. Those are the type of listeners that listen to this type of podcast. And I want to just tell you, keep going. I want to tell you, keep learning, keep taking the wisdom and applying it. Keep taking these lessons learned from me and apply them to your life. Take the wisdom from our guest and carry it out and spread it with others. Thank you for investing in me. Thank you for investing in you. And I just want to tell you, I love you. I believe in you. And I truly, truly believe that God is going to do amazing things in your life because you are putting the work in. So thank you for believing in this little podcast. Thank you for helping it to grow into something far bigger than I would have ever imagined. Thank you for helping us to get to 100 episodes. You are the reason that I hit record every single week. And I want to just ask you, if you are listening right now on iTunes, please drop a review. If you've never done a review for the podcast, it absolutely means the world to me. And as a way to celebrate 100 episodes, it would just be so encouraging for me to get a floodload of reviews. So if you can take just 1 minute, if you're on listening to iTunes, just scroll down, click review the podcast, throw those 5 stars up there, and just write a little something, how the podcast has encouraged you. You can even just put a thumbs up emoji in there, but I would love to hear how the podcast has impacted you. And that would be the best gift for me to celebrate my 100th episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, if you are not subscribing, subscribe, please. You subscribing to the podcast just helps the podcast to get seen more and for others to hear the message. And write a comment. Drop a comment in this episode. Even just say, hey, happy 100th episode. Your comments mean the world to me. And it's just a little bit of encouragement for me to keep going. Y'all, I don't monetize off of any of this. This is purely ministry. This is self-funded. I like putting this out on the platforms. It does cost money. I have to pay a subscription to my podcast host every month, and I don't make any money off of this podcast. But your reviews would just help for it to get seen so that I know that people are being impacted, and it's just encouragement for me to keep going. So I also want to just take this time to thank my listeners worldwide. Y'all, this is absolutely insane. It blows my mind that I have listeners throughout all of the United States, but I also have listeners in Germany. Shout out to Frankfurt am Maine. I'm totally saying that wrong. I know I am. I don't know how to pronounce the city that shows up every week in my stats. So whoever the person is in Germany, in Frankfurt am Maine, I love you. And I want to know who you are. So you got to reach out, send your girl a message. Also, shout out to Australia, my listeners in Sydney, New South Wales. Y'all, I can't wait to get to Germany and to Australia. We'll have to connect we'll maybe one day do like a podcast tour to the cities that y'all are showing up for me at. I just throwing it out there. Lord, you will make it happen one way or another. If that's where it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And then I got listeners in Ireland. Y'all, thank you. I cannot believe that I am reaching a worldwide listenership. It's so humbling to know that there are people in Germany, people in Australia, people in Ireland that are showing up. And these are all bucket list places that I want to go see. All right. I need some people to show up from Switzerland also and Italy, because those are some other places that I want to go visit. So the more that you share, the more reach we have, and just the more people can be impacted through the podcast. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I also, as I'm just sharing gratitude on you, the listeners, I also just want to highlight some special guests. And y'all, I've had the most amazing guests. And when I tell y'all like who is to come, just get ready. I have some amazing guests, not just lined up and already recorded. Y'all, get excited because I have the most amazing bucket guest list ever. Some of those people I have already crossed off. People like Pastor Bianca. Oh my goodness. She's not only my pastor, but she is someone that I have looked up to for a really long time. And Pastor B has a huge audience, a huge impact, a huge reach, and a huge platform. And when I asked her to be on my podcast, I was super scared and I was just ready to hear a no because she's such a busy woman. And I know that, there are much bigger platforms that she could spend her time on. But when I asked her, it was an immediate yes, absolutely. Here is the info to my assistant to book a time with me. And I was like, I was floored, y'all. I was like, are you kidding me? She said yes to me. Pastor Bianca, she is episode number 82, Understanding Your Spiritual Gifts. And I just got to give her a shout out because as my pastor, the fact that she took time to, she didn't even ask, what kind of platform do you have? What are your numbers? What are your downloads? Like that, she wasn't about that. She trusted me and she knew that I had a platform that is reaching people for good. And just having been a volunteer and, serving with her alongside building the church, she had that trust in me to not even question about the podcast or the numbers or anything. She just showed up for me and for you, the listeners. And her message of understanding spiritual gifts, it was a great message. I also want to shout out, this was episode number 51. This was with a guest. His name was Fletcher Cleaves. And the episode was titled Joy Through Adversity. And y'all, Fletcher, his story was so impactful. He was paralyzed in a car accident of someone who was texting and driving that veered him off of the road. He was a young 19-year-old boy at the time. He had just started his first year of college playing football. And here he got thrown this curveball of now he's paralyzed. His dream of being a college football star is over. His entire life changed because he became paralyzed. And now he had to learn how to live his life in a wheelchair, being paralyzed from the waist down. And his story was just so impactful. The joy that was in his message, even going through something so impactful like that. And not only was his story just so encouraging, but behind the scenes, after we stopped recording, I had shared with him how my son at the time, he was a senior in high school and he was applying to play college ball, all this stuff. My son, I've shared many times, he played football in high school and he is a strong athlete. And he said, can I talk to your son and just give him some encouraging words? So I went and I grabbed my son and I had him sit in front of the computer and I was like, hey, this is Fletcher. And Fletcher just sat and gave him some wisdom about college, finding recruiters and what it's like to play in college, what it's like to face adversity when things don't happen. He gave such encouraging wisdom to my son, which was off record. It was in his heart to speak and give a heartfelt and words of encouragement to my son. And I will never forget that. So that is just an interview that really impacted me. And y'all, the most number one downloaded episode of all 100 episodes, it is my second podcast episode. It's episode number 2, and it's titled 5 Steps to Creating Healthy Habits. It was published on February 14th, 2022, 3 years ago, y'all, and people are still downloading this episode. I cannot believe that episode number 2 is still getting downloads every week. It is my highest downloaded episode of all times. It has hundreds and hundreds of podcast downloads because y'all just want to know how to create healthy habits. And I'm here for it. So I just wanted to highlight those episodes of a couple of guests that just had a huge impact on me and the number one most downloaded podcast episode. Now, I just want to thank all of my listeners with a little giveaway. If you are listening, I want y'all to head over to my Instagram the week of me hitting 100th episode. So I am publishing this episode on January 30th. And the week following, I'm going to be running a giveaway on my Instagram. I'm going to be giving away some merch. I'm going to be giving away journals. I'm going to be giving away some gift cards just to celebrate the 100 episodes. And I want you, the listeners, to be a part of that and to be some of the recipients of some of my giveaways. So make sure that you head over to my Instagram. There is a link in the show notes that gets you directly to my Instagram. My Instagram handle is @yourjoyfulorder_style. Go and look for the big 100th episode little picture on my Instagram, and you guys will get the details to enter the giveaway. Make sure you go and be part of that giveaway because I want you to be a winner of some great prizes. Now, I just want to wrap up with what the vision of the podcast looks like. What is ahead for Your Joyful Order podcast? As we celebrate this milestone of 100 episodes, I can't help but to dream about what's next. I'm planning more incredible guests. I'm planning deeper conversations and new things that will continue to inspire and challenge all of us. And honestly, I had a goal of just reaching 100 episodes. Back in May of last year, I ended season 4, questionable if I was going to come back or not. I had to really sit with God and say, God, what is ahead for this? Am I done? Do I just need to be done? Has everyone heard what I have to say? Do I have to keep going? Is there more to this? And I was overwhelmed and I was stressed by the podcast. Really, it was causing friction between my husband and I because the stress of us getting a new episode out every week, and knowing that this wasn't making money, but it was so time consuming. It was a really hard decision for us to determine, do we keep going and putting the time into it, even though it's not making us any profit? And that's where I had to sit and, have that conversation of remind myself it's just for the one and this is a ministry. And my husband came to me and he was like, Leslie, we're not over. I need you to put your big girl panties on and we need to hit 100 episodes. Let's hit 100 episodes and let's see what's in store for us. So I am here committed. I hit the 100 episodes, but I'm not done. I don't feel that God has closed this door yet. I feel that there is a lot to come from the podcast. And when it's God's timing for us to stop at whatever number episode that is, I know that I will feel content and say, okay, I think we're good at closing this door. But I will tell you for now, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going to 150 episodes. Maybe we're going to hit 200 episodes. But I do not see in the near future me stopping anytime soon. I feel like I finally have just found my groove. I have finally found a system that works to make this a little less stressful and to make it less overwhelming. And with that said, I want to say that I feel like we're just getting started. And just like that, friends, episode 100 has come to an end. But this is really just a celebration of the past, and it's a launch pad into what is ahead for the podcast. If you've taken anything away from this episode, let it be this. Know that being resilient matters. Know that your voice matters and that God gave you a voice to share with others. Being authentic is the real deal. People trust and connect when you are being authentic. And when you focus on just impacting the one person, the ripple effect of that can be life changing. So thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up every week, for cheering me on. Here is to the next 100 episodes of learning, laughing, and growing together. And until next time, my friend, continue to chase joy.